Okay, so if I can get everyone to look in class 14 files, so it actually is the very last day. Although I think I don't, do we get 15 classes in this class this semester? We don't in this fall. The fall has gotten so bad now that I don't think there's any class that's, I think every single class is 14 weeks, I think. But at any rate, it doesn't matter. If you go to class 14 files, because those you should have, there's a folder that says Vanishing Point. If you click on Vanishing Point, we're going to actually start with, let me see, yeah, there's a vanishingpoint.psd file inside that. If you can open that thing up into Photoshop, that would be great. It's a picture of a dog on a porch. Has everybody got this? Okay, so the thing that I'm going to show you right now is actually, it's a tool that goes way back. I'm hoping it's still there, so we'll find out. But anyway, the issue in this is that if I want to remove like whatever the coiled, I think it's a hose that's on the back of this, and you want to remove the, I think that's a pool brush on that kind of stuff, or for that matter, if you want to remove the dog, the issue that you have in this is that trying to do this is, we would use clone stamp to replace this stuff, but you're trying to do it in perspective. So you can see that the boards in the back are much narrower than the ones that are in the front. So you have to give Photoshop a way, there's a space in Photoshop that understands perspective as long as you explain it to Photoshop. And then once you do that, it allows you to do a limited number of tools in perspective. And so that's what we're going to do with this one. So our first move on this is to make a copy of this layer. Command J. You can't do this with a smart object. I'm fairly certain. I'm going to find out right there. You don't need to do this. I'm going to just make mine a smart object really quickly and then see if Vanishing Point's grayed out. And it is. So they have not, again, this is a really old tool, so that is not, you can't do this on a smart object. So this is going to be destructive, which is okay because we're working on a copy of the layer. So again, I'm going to go back to where it was just a regular layer copy, up to the filter menu, down to Vanishing Point. And when you get into Vanishing Point, it'll come in, it'll give you, we're in a whole new space now. Again, Photoshop does this. This is like select and mask. We're in a completely different working space now that's contained inside of Photoshop. So to start with this, you need to, if you look at the tools that are on the far right-hand side, far left-hand side up at the very top, there's a grid tool that's usually selected by size. There's also, you can change the grid size. You don't need to worry too much about changing the grid size on this. You'll get the idea of what's going on here. And then what we're going to do is we need to drag out, you'll see what we're going to ultimately do, but you don't want to start too close to this corner. What I'm going to do, watch my screen first. Let me show you what I'm going to do, and then I'll restart it and do it together with you guys. But you start by clicking on a single point, and it then what I'm doing is I'm actually tracing the perspective lines of the deck. The problem is that when I come over to do this next perspective line, I need to try to figure out how the horizontal, well, it's not really a horizontal line, but how the line that's going from this point down to the lower left-hand side to the upper right-hand side, it can't be distorted like this. It's got to be coming across this squarely. So I'm guessing on this, you can look at the seams of the wood where they're cut. That gives me some indication of what that line should look like. And then I'm going to do another point out here on the other side of the dog, and you'll see when you do that, it connects back. I've now got a triangle going, but if I move here to the back of the dog, I need to figure out what line of board that really is. And then as I come here to the back, I also need to try to make this line in the back as if it's going straight across the way the cut lines. You see the small cut lines that are in the boards going across? I'm trying to keep those parallel to that, and then I'm going to just click on that. And you can see it puts out a grid on this. And in this case, the grid is actually very difficult to see on my screen. It's a blue grid right now. Maybe if we change the grid size, it'll actually, yeah, it's a little easier to see what we're actually talking about now. So I've dropped my grid size. The size of the grid isn't going to have an impact on this. But you can see now it's actually this thing is in perspective. So again, I'm going to do this now with all of you guys. So I'm going to cancel out of this. We're going to start it again. So again, take this, come up to the filter menu, down to vanishing point. And then again, you don't want to click so far back. You don't kind of want to be, you don't want to start at the top left-hand corner, because if you do, you have no way to actually get the point that's going to be the upper right-hand corner out here. So that's why I start sort of in the middle area right here. Again, I'm going to click one point there. Yes?
What if it gives you a grid already, like when you open?
I was just about to ask that.
So it just,
Click on the grid thing on the very top, the icon on the top again, and just see what happens. Did anything change? No, click on the,
Another grid.
say what?
It like makes the grid clear for me, but it just gives like the outline of the grid.
Why do I get the feeling this is the latest version of Photoshop and they have fucked this up?
Avery says if you hit delete, it'll go away.
Oh, okay, good call. Perfect, hit delete and it's gone. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to click on one of the, again, the spaces between the boards. That's the easiest thing to do. I'm going to come down and click here, down the bottom, come across and try to, again, I'm looking at these short lines here to sort of get some idea of the angle that I should be bringing this across. You have to eyeball it. And then do the same thing at the back of the dog, which is going to be really a challenge here, but I feel like that's close enough. So it'll give you this grid. Again, in my case right now, it looks like I've got still a really big grid and not the size that I said. But nonetheless. So then you can drag this grid. So does everybody have the grid? Yes? No? Anybody know? Okay, you can drag this grid then to cover your entire image. So look at my screen to see what I'm talking about really quick. If you come, I'm going to grab the control point that's right in the middle by the dog, in my case, by the dog's foot. You can click and drag forward. It'll pull the whole thing forward. You can also then click on the one at the back and click and drag it back. And then you can come to the one that's on the in the middle of the left-hand side and click to drag it all the way out and then go the opposite way in this so that your grid covers your entire image. That's what we're really looking for here. So now my grid is on the entire image, and if I've done this correctly, this is how Photoshop now knows what the perspective of this space is. So then we can come down to the clone stamp tool. So again, you have very limited tools in doing this. Clone stamp is what this is really designed to do. So if you click on the clone stamp tool, the grid itself will actually go away. You can then work on, and again, this is another thing that I don't like the way they've actually done this part of it all, is that instead of, they've got diameter, but none of these controls seem to be the same. I don't know why they don't just use a brush like they do in Photoshop, but they don't. Anyway, I'm going to crank the hardness up just a little bit. I don't want to leave it at 50%, so I'm going to boost this up. I want a little bit harder edge on here, so I'm going to try 75. If it's too hard, fine. 100% opacity. For the time being right now, we're going to leave healing off. And we can try this again if it doesn't work. You do want to leave aligned on because what this will do is wherever we sample a point, it's actually going to sample, and then when we do when we set our source point and then we set our destination point, it will keep that in perspective. So I'm going to go after the pool thing first. So whatever this thing is down here, I'm going to go after this first. We need to be careful though, because if I sample too high on this, so if I come up in this area up in here and I end up sampling this cut board, the board that's cut right here, I'm going to end up putting that somewhere else down here. So we might actually try, this might work. I've never actually tried this part. We might try sampling that and then lining it up with a cut board down here. I don't know if that's going to work well for me or not. I'm worried about this seam that's right here as well. But you can do this, those sorts of things, if they are off here in the Vanishing Point workspace, those are things that you can clean up in Photoshop, in the normal conventional version of Photoshop, because this is not something that you need to retouch out in perspective. So anyway, I'm going to try it back here. I don't think I'm going to go after that. Yeah, let's try. We'll cut. So I'm going to try the cut board. If you hover your cursor right over the cut line that's on that back part, hold down the Option key and click. That sets your source point. And then if you come down here, again, you can't do the transparency in this. This tool does not work like the clone stamp tool in Photoshop works anymore. So I can try to sort of eyeball it down in this area right down in here, and I'm going to simply click down here and drag out. Now I got a distortion in that, and that's telling me that my grid is off. The grid part isn't perfect in this. So, but you'll get some idea, and hopefully yours will actually be better. But that as we continue to work over here in this stuff right here, and that is not staying aligned. It's not staying aligned either. So I'm going to do another sample point up in here. I'm going to try going all the way back in this, guys. Hang on one second. I'm going to try and pull another grid on this because this sucks. And I'm going to drop my hardness back down. I need obviously more forgiveness in this. So I'm going to go back down to a 50 on this. And then again, I'm not even going to worry about those cut lines. I'll fix those in Photoshop. Hold down the Option key, do a new sample right here, and then come down and just get it to line up, and then clone stamp out. And you can see it keeps all of your lines in perspective. Are they a little bit wavy? A little bit. Could you maybe clean it up a little bit more? Maybe try this again. Maybe enlarge the picture a little bit, whatever. But you sort of see what's going on in here. It's still left me some problems in here. I've got tonal issues that are right here that you can see. That's the softness of the brush is screwing me up there. But I'm going to actually then sample this area towards the front and set that as my source point, and then actually get it to line up and get rid of the hose that's in the back. So it's not perfect, but I could go in and again, using tonal retouching, I can match this stuff out. And if I'm really crazed about that, a little bit of liquify to clean up those lines and I'm off to the races. But it's just so much better to be doing this in perspective than trying to, especially if you're doing bricks and that kind of stuff that are already kind of like this. It's just, this will change everything. Questions about this? Did this work for you guys better than it did for me? Sort of? Okay, cool. You can cancel out of that. We're going to do another one here really quick. Go ahead and close this one up. It's the same workspace, but a very different thing. So the next image I'm looking for is this gallery space. If you can open that up in Photoshop. So we can do the same thing here in gallery space. I'm going to make a copy of this layer, Command J. I'm going to go again up to the filter menu, down to vanishing point. This one's a little easier to establish the grid on the room. So I'm going to start with the grid on the wall that's closest to us, and I'm just going to trace the line that's on the very top. So I'm going to click on the very top here. I'm going to come down to the corner and click. I'm going to come down to this corner and click. And then for the third one, this is the only one you have to guess on. It needs to be perfectly straight up and down. What you should know is this: if Photoshop has some fudge room in here, but if I were to really take this back to just an exaggerated extreme version of this, you can see it's still giving me this. If you get something that Photoshop says, no, that's impossible, it cannot be that way, this grid will go red. You won't see it blue like this. Now, in my case, I deliberately tried to do that. It didn't actually say I did that, so I'm just going to go again and just trace it out. But if you get a red one, that's basically what it's telling you, is that your grid is wrong. And I'm just trying to guess and get that my vertical line right now to make sure it's about the same as the painting that's on the wall. So I'm going to then click on that. I've now got my grid. I'm going to grab the point in the very center of the wall and drag it to the left-hand side to finish that part out. But now you can actually use this to trace the back wall as well. To do that, you hold down the Option key and click on this mid part and then just start to drag. It's not the Option key, it's the, I have no idea what key this is. It's not the Shift key. It may just do it on its own. Nope. Undo. Control key, Command key. I'm trying them all. Is it Command? Yep, it's the Command key. Just click on that point and start to drag to the right, and it will do that entire wall. You need to continue that all the way to the far wall, even though it looks like there's a soffit that's up at the top that it's not going. Wow. This is not at all what I see on my screen right here. That's bizarre. But I've lost the grid that's on this whole wall right here. So hang on, let me undo that part. That's my grid. Command, drag across, and let go. I'm going to try the Command key one more time, and we're going to drag it on the right wall. I'm hoping that this is keeping all of these guys on here.
I have to hold down Shift and then highlight all the walls to get them all to show.
Wow, but I think if we just come back onto this wall, yeah, it's just you pick any wall. You don't have to, we don't need to select them all. Okay, and I'm also going to do the ceiling at the very top. So I'm going to do the final one. I've just selected the right wall, just clicked on it to select it, hold down the Command key, and you can come across the very top. It'll be the ceiling part. And then let go of this. And now you can click on any given wall. So then the next control that we have on this is, if you take a look on the tools that are on the left-hand side, it's the one, it's just the marquee selection tool. It's the square that's underneath the grid. If you click on this, this will allow you to select anything. We're going to select the painting that's actually on the wall right there. When you do this, though, you need to give yourself room when you drag this out. You'll see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to click above the sort of, I want to be kind of close to it, but you need border around this. You can't perfectly select just the painting. You need a little of the white border around it. So I'm going to click at the top and I'm going to drag this out, and you'll see it actually gives me my selection in perspective. But when I did it, I'm a little too close to the top. So I'm hoping if you hold down the Shift key, it's going to allow us to reposition this. We'll find out. Hold down your Shift key and push slightly up. Now, see, this is how the tool should do that. That's how it works in regular Photoshop, but not here. So I'm going to hit Command D to deselect, and I've got to make another selection here to make sure that I get the entirety of the top, and that's a better one. And you need to make sure that you also get the shadow at the bottom of this. And then we're just going to copy and paste this. Command C will actually copy this. Command V will paste it. And then hopefully, it may have pasted it in place. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes if we didn't have a selection going, I'm hoping it's pasted it right on top of itself. If you don't have a selection going, a lot of times it'll put it up in the upper left-hand corner. You just need to grab it with your cursor and move it. So I'm going to grab this, and it had copied. It made a copy of it right on that wall in its same space. But now when you transfer it around the grid, this actually rewraps onto the other planes. And so when you come back onto this wall over here, it actually rewraps onto that. You can even bring it up onto the ceiling. And right now, Aaron is going fucking yay. Crazy, isn't it? you can bring other objects into this. So if you go ahead and say okay to this, I'm going to leave mine up on the roof. If we select something else, so open up another image, if we go up to the file menu and come down to open recent, let's go after the vanishing point.psd. Let's grab the dog and see if we can put the dog in the gallery space. So I'm just going to do a select subject, and hopefully it'll figure out that I want the dog. And it does. It's selected a lot of other things too, though. I want to get rid of these other things. So I'm just going to hit the L key to get the lasso tool, hold down the Option key to get the minus lasso tool, and deselect the hose and deselect the tool, the pool brush. So we just have the dog. I'm going to copy the dog. Command C will put it on the clipboard, and then I'm going to come back into my file right here. I'm going to go back into vanishing point, and it should remember that I've actually already got this guy going. And it's saying you're going to paste the content of this into a different color space. Are you okay? And I'm going to say, yep, I'm fine with that. And then hit Command V to paste. And it does. It puts the dog in the top left-hand corner, but he's not in perspective until you click him. And then all of a sudden he is in perspective. So on the back wall, he is in perspective, and then on the side wall, he's like weirder, or up on the top wall. So, I mean, it's a pretty remarkable tool, but if you were doing the kind of work that you're doing and Ty, the kind of work that you're doing, this thing can change everything. Especially, again, I can just keep thinking about all those lines of brick and getting that to all line up. It's just, it's a nightmare, but this tool will do a really good job of it. Okay, but so will. Don't think of just that. All the new AI stuff. So generative fill, just make a selection of the graffiti, see what generative fill does. Content-aware fill is another one that'll help keep lines going. You're throwing AI at it. This is actually old school, so it's not AI. You're saying this is what the perspective is. Okay, so yeah, anyway, we can cancel out of that. You can close this file up. We're going to do one last thing here that will help you guys with your composites. We didn't get to complex shadows today. I haven't graded your composites that you turned in, and I was kind of doing that deliberately because what I want to do, and we will simply do this next week, is I want to actually work on your composites here in class as a class. Because I think the best way to learn how to work with check layers is actually just to do composite after composite, especially ones that aren't your own. So that's what I want to do. So I'm going to do that. I haven't graded them yet. I had this idea that I didn't want to see these. Like, you guys aren't going to see these, everybody else's, until we actually do this. And I kind of want to fly without a net here. I want to do the same thing. I mean, typically I go through all of these things and I really lay out how to do it so it's faster, but I think that's disingenuous. So I think if you really want to see, or I really want to show you how I work through these things, whatever, it helps not to know. So there's a chance, although I don't want my grading to back up, but there's a chance I'm not going to look at these until we do this next week. So if you haven't turned it in, now would be a good time to get that shit turned in, because I haven't graded it yet, so it's not late yet. Okay, so that being said, we are going to do one last thing. Did you guys by any chance save the composite of the tree thing when we were first looking at check layers? If not, I have mine, and I can put mine up onto the server really quick, and you can copy it down. I'll show you the one that I'm looking for. This one, the trees, the composite we did. Do you guys have this one after we ran the check layers on it? Does anybody not have this? Okay, I'm gonna put it up on the server right now. Let me do one thing to hopefully make sure that the permissions are all okay on this. So go to our server. I haven't gotten it up there yet, but I'm going to get it soon. It's up there right now. So go to our server, go to Engelhard. Don't go into the Dropbox. It's sitting in the level of the server that you can actually reach it. It's called trees 019 dash tiff dash 1.tiff. If you can copy that down to your desktop, don't run it off the server. It'll take forever and make everybody else's shit take forever too. Can you guys get to it? Yep. All right. Pull this into Photoshop. So this is the one that we did all the check layers on, and we did the, and it's actually, it looks pretty good. I mean, it was, again, could I spend more time on this? Sure. But this was certainly a vast improvement over where we started to begin with. But what we're missing in this is any sort of sense of depth of field. So to get the sense of depth of field, there's a billion ways that you can do this. A lot of people who don't really know what they're doing would just basically, they would mask the girl out. They would run a Gaussian blur on the background, whatever, and then mask it out. They do those sorts of things, but I'm going to show you the way you actually should do it. It's one of the most complex tools not complex tools, it's one of the most difficult things that Photoshop has ever engineered and stuck inside of Photoshop. But they actually have a filter in Photoshop that reconstructs the physics of how a camera lens actually works. And you can use that to create depth of field in your image. The challenge is that when you do that, you have to tell Photoshop what the depth of your image really is. You have to point that out to Photoshop. You have to say, okay, this is near, this is far, this is in between. You have to do that. That thing's called a depth map, and that's what we're going to build in here, and then we're simply going to use the depth map on this image. So to do this, go all the way to the very top of your image. Your check layers should be turned off. As a matter of fact, for right now, I'm going to get rid of my check layers because they've done all the work that they're going to do. So I'm going to select the very top one, hold down the Shift key, and come down and do the luminosity check layer that seems to have selected everything else, and I don't know why. So I'm going to do that in reverse. I'm going to select my luminosity check layer and then go all the way back up and click on the check layers at the top and hit the delete key. And so this is now just the image that I've got. I actually added some fall off to the bottom of my image. So yeah, it just made things a little bit darker. It's the same trick that we did with the girl in the alleyway when we were doing that extreme color correction. So you may not have this on yours. That part doesn't matter. So whatever the top layer you have is that is visible, select it. And then we're going to do a merge stamp of all of this into a single layer. So the Command key, the Option key, the Shift key, and the letter E will do a merge stamp version of this entire top. And so unfortunately, the tool that we're going to use now that will actually create the blur that's based on this lens thing does not work on a smart object. It kills me that this doesn't, but it doesn't. So you're just going to have to leave this layer as it is. I'm going to double click on it and rename it DOF, depth of field. And then we're going to build the depth map. So to start with this, we are going to go over to our channels palette and look for the girl. I don't see the girl over on the channels palette at all, so I'm just going to come over to my layers palette. You want to find the composite body layer, the thing where she's just on a transparent background, and we're going to load that as a selection. So just hover over the composite body 2 layer, hold down the Command key, and click to load this as a selection. Go up to the very top, and then we are going to add a blank layer on the very top. So above my DOF layer, click to add a blank layer on the very top of this. And then we want to fill this with black. Black is not my foreground or background color, so I'm going to hit the D key first to get those to be default to my foreground and background color. Black is my foreground color, so then I'm going to hold down the Option key and hit delete, and just fills this with black. Command D to deselect. So the way a depth map works is that you establish depth by tone. So you use black as what is in focus, white is what is most out of focus, and tones of gray are in between. So this is going to keep the girl in focus, and if I put this on a white background, everything else in my image would be out of focus, but that's not how things really work. So I'm going to add another layer on top of this. I'm going to do an adjustment layer on top of this. So come down to the little icon at the bottom of your layers palette that's a circle that's half black and half white, and we are going to add a gradient, not a gradient map, but a gradient. So again, there's two types of gradient things in your adjustment layers, not the gradient map, that's what we use to do the extreme color, but just a regular gradient. It'll pull up a gradient map that you can actually see here. The gradient fill dialog box will actually open up. So what I want to do now is I want to establish the black that's going to be underneath the girl. That's going to show the part of the ground that she's standing on that would be in focus. And then I need this to actually fade off into white on the other part. So for the style of gradient, in the drop-down menu, I'm going to click on this drop-down menu to get the type of gradient, so the thing that's at the very top, open up the basics, and I'm going to click on the first one that's actually going to take me from black to white. Actually, I take that back. I'm going to do this with the transparent one right now because I can see where it is. I'm going to get it in the proper space, and then I will change the type of gradient. So, because I need to be able to see where this is going on my image. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse that and tape the style of gradient, the thing that's right underneath it, click on that, and you're going to do a reflected gradient. And when you do that, you'll see it puts this black bar across the center of your image. Now we can move this black bar around. You can just come right out on your image and you can move this thing up and down. We are going to move it down so that it is actually going right underneath her feet. So you can see now I've got black underneath her feet, but then I don't have that's not what's going to the background or for the foreground. So this is in the correct spot. If you want to narrow the area, if you think that the area that we're going to say now is in focus is too wide, it's too much, you can narrow this line down by using the scale. So if you just hover over the scale and actually drop it down, it'll make that line a little bit more narrow. And I'm going to narrow mine down. I'm going to bring it down to like a 55%. I'm also going to reset it so that it's actually going right under her feet. So now I've got a gradient that's actually in pretty good position. And now I'm going to then change this from, I'm clicking on the very top icon, the type of gradient. I'm going to click on that, open it up, open up the basic version, and click on black to white. And so now I've actually got, and you can see it's going from not just a solid line of black, it's actually got a gradient that tapers off to get to white. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Now, I need to see the girl in relationship to this, so I'm going to take the girl and drag her up on top of the gradient map. So this is the beginning of what I'm going to use for my depth map right here. So the areas that are in black are going to be in focus. The areas that are in pure white are going to be out of focus, and then the areas where I've got gray in here are going to make that transition from being in focus to out of focus. However, if you turn both of these off, you will also see there's a tree in the middle of this, in the middle of that dropping back part. I want the tree to be more in focus than the background. I don't want it, the tree is not laying flat like my background that's going away from me. Jesus, how crunchy can this thing be? Sorry, I haven't noticed the screen is this bad, but at least you guys can follow what's going on. But at any rate, the tree is upright, so the tree should not have depth of, it should be less focused than the girl, but the tree should not be going out of focus from the bottom of the tree to the top of the tree. That is not how depth of field works. So we need to make it a solid color. So I'm going to click on my depth of field layer. I'm going to just grab my quick selection tool. This doesn't need to be this will work without it being a perfect selection. I'm just going to grab the quick selection tool and I'm going to select the tree. If it goes out into the space out in the back, which mine has right here, I'm just going to hold, I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. I'm going to hold down the Option key to get the negative quick selection tool and just clean up that edge on the background. Make sure that I do have all of this in the foreground. I do want the roots selected. I want all of that part selected. So this is now my tree. I'm going to go up to the girl layer that's on the very top of my depth map right now. I'm going to add a new layer up on the very top of that. Then I'm going to turn on the gradient map, and what I'm looking to do is I want to sample roughly the tone of gray where the tree starts. So I need this tone of gray right here, and you can see even if I can't select it, it's reading like a 127. That's what I'm sort of getting in this background. I'm hoping if I hold down my option key, no, it's not going to select this guy. But I know that what I need to fill this selection with is basically, again, I'm looking at here, it's like a 128, 127, 130, something like that. It's a middle gray. So I'm simply going to fill this selection with a middle gray. So come up to the edit menu, come down to fill. A dialog box will open up, click on the drop down menu, come down to 50% gray and say okay. Now that's going to be Command D to deselect. Now had it been a different tone, I would have just looked over the tone. I would have changed my foreground color to be, let's say it wasn't reading 128, let's say it was reading 100. I would simply open up my foreground color, make my foreground color 100, 100, 100, that color gray, and then again make the selection, put on a new layer, fill it with the foreground color, and these would be hundreds, hundreds, hundreds. Make sense, everyone? We good on this part? You can do it after the fact as well. You could actually click, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Right now, if I hover over the tree, you'll see it's 128, but let's say I want it to be 131. Select the foreground color, type in 131 for all of your values of RGB. So 131, tab key 131, tab key 131. Say okay to that. Come back over to the tree layer itself, Command click to load that as a selection, and then to fill with my foreground color, again, it's Option delete will actually fill that. And you can see I'm a 131 now. So that's how you would modify that part. Command D to deselect. I'm going to turn the girl back on, so she's sitting there. This is now my depth map. So to use this, we actually need to make a copy of it. So come over to your channels palette. It doesn't matter what channel you copy, whether it's the red, green, or the blue. It doesn't matter. They're all identical because this is a grayscale. So I'm just going to drag my blue channel down to the little square with the plus in the middle of it. It will duplicate it. I'm going to double click on this and rename it depth map. DEPTHMAP. So does everybody have this? We good? Okay. All the stuff that we use to make this you can throw away. So throw away the layer of the tree, throw away the layer of the girl, throw away the gradient, all of that. It's done its work. All we needed it to do was to build this depth map. Then select the depth of field layer that's up on the very top, and then come up to the filter menu, down to the blur menu, down to lens blur. So take a look up at my screen. Again, if we had made this, well here, I'll show you. I'm gonna make this a smart object before we run this thing. You don't make yours a smart object because it won't work. That's the point of this. I just wanna show you. So up to layer, smart objects, convert to smart object. Then when I come up to my filter menu, down to blur, you see lens blur is grayed out. This is the thing that we need to use. So I'm going to Command Z to undo that smart object, up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to lens blur. And this will open up a dialog box. This is where the lens is actually recreated. Now, if you have a slow computer, and mine is very slow right now because I'm using all sorts of resources, I'm going to leave my preview set to faster. But once you dial this in, or if you weren't actually recording this and running Photoshop and also running OSB to record, if you weren't doing all of that, I would go ahead and put this on more accurate. But in the depth map itself, you want to click on the drop-down menu and you want to pick depth map. That is what we just made. If you had called it, like if you had misspelled it and you call it, depth mump, that's what this would read. Again, this is just picking up the channels that you have saved in this image so far. So go ahead and select that depth map. And then you've got blur focal distance here. This has to do with what is blurred in your image. And you'll see it's set to 0. If you click on this thing on the blur focal distance and drag it all the way to the right, you'll see that it goes to 255. This is just telling Photoshop what tone you want to be in focus. Now, when we built the depth map, we said we wanted black to actually be the focus point in this. So that's why that's why the girl now is completely soft and the white background is completely sharp. If you drag it all the way back, it will actually set it on the girl. There's also a set focal point. If you click on this, this will pick any tone that you want to be in focus. So if you click on that and then click on the tree, let me click on this, and then click on the tree goes in focus and the girl in the background both go out of focus because now I've set my focus point to 131. This is exactly the value that we put in here. So this is how the depth map actually works. You can use that to click back on the girl again. It will reset it to 0. And then the way you control the amount of blur and actually all of the characteristics of the lens happen down below this. So radius, if you click on this and drag it to the right, it increases your blur considerably. And you'll see if you can zoom in on this guy, your tools to zoom in and out still work. So Command and Space Bar, you can click on this. This is actually creating bokeh in the background. You cannot do that using Gaussian blur or whatever other blur you actually use. This is actually saying this is a lens, this is the physics of a lens, and you can control more of it. This blade curvature and actually not the hexagon shape here, if you click on the iris shape, this is actually your aperture shape. If you click on this drop-down menu, you will see that you can do different number of blades. So what these blades are the aperture blades in your lens. So really high expensive lenses have many more aperture blades. Cheaper lenses have few of those. These actually control the shape of your bokeh as well. If you pick a 3-blade aperture, it ends up basically being a triangle and your bokeh will be that. If you pick like a pentagon or a hexagon, the hexagon sort of gives your bokeh more like a stop sign shape. And then if you go all the way down to this 8-blade, it's much closer to being round. So again, this you can change the shape of it. You can change the curvature of that, how extreme the curves of those. You are recreating the mechanical part of your lens here. It's insane. You don't really need to go that deep into this. So you're really looking for something that you like in here. So I'm going to leave mine as a hexagon. I'm going to leave my blur. I think the 80 is a little too much, but what aperture did you shoot this in? Did you shoot this wide open? You would have much more blur in the background. Did you shoot this way stop down? Well, then if you crank your radius back down, your background would be sharper. Did you shoot this at f45? Well, keep dragging this thing back down to get it sharper. There is a preview check mark on here that you can use to turn on and off to sort of see what we're creating here. And you can see it's really convincing. So I don't shoot at f45. I'm going to crank mine back up to probably around 50, somewhere in there. Then you can also rotate the bokeh. So again, that has to do, if you imagine a stop sign, you've got a flat top and flat sides with corners that actually go on diagonal. You can rotate that whole stop sign so that you had points up at the top. I mean, you can control all of this shit. It's crazy. If we had white spots in the background that represented highlights like true lights, like car lights, like that kind of stuff, you can actually click on adding spectral highlights, and what that will do is it will take those spots in the background and flare them just like would happen with a real lens. In our case, we don't. But then the final thing that you need to realize about this is that all blur tools do this. They take an image, and an image has either grain or noise. If it's film, it has grain. If it's digital, it has noise. When you do these blurs, it gets rid of that grain or that noise. To have it still be believable, you need to return some of that. And that's the last thing down at the very bottom. You do want a certain amount. I'm going to put on, you can actually take your amount to 0 of noise, and you'll see the background is simply too smooth. So I put in a 1 value. I also keep my noise as monochrome and Gaussian. It's just the distribution of it. If you feel like it doesn't match your image, you would want to zoom in and make sure that the grain of the girl is actually being matched by the grain of the background. That's what you're really looking at it to be. You want them to have a similar kind of vibe to it. And that 1 is not quite enough. So I'm going to hit this as a 2. You'll see it just gets crunchier in the background. And I'm going to say okay to that. And then finally, again, just hit okay. And you have now added depth of field, real depth of field. Look at how soft the background is. You can see your preview on and off by turning this on and off. It actually softened up the foreground nicely. She's sharp in the background, and then the background. Now, you can always, if you're not happy with this, you can always go back into your depth of field map and modify it. You can go and you could paint on this. You could say, oh, it's too soft in the front. So you could just take a brush. If black is your foreground color, I'm going to click on the depth map to work on it. Hit the B key to get a brush. Make it a larger brush. Much larger brush. Change my flow way down. So down 2, 3, something like that. My foreground color is black, but I can actually start to come down here in this area down in here and start to just, that's way too much flow, way too strong. Command Z to undo that. It's also too hard of a brush, so I'm gonna make it soft. I'm gonna drop my flow all the way down, and then I can just bring in a little bit more tone down in here. That will cause this area to be sharper. You can do this all over your image. You want a little bit more of this, you feel like it went too fast back there this shouldn't be in focus, or it shouldn't be the same. You can do all sorts of, you can still modify this, is all I'm trying to say. Questions about this? Again, next level. I will see you guys. There is no assignments other than working on your final projects for the rest of this class. Hopefully you turned in 10-1 today. That was what was due, the swimsuit, and that will be your last weekly assignment. And I'll see you guys next week.